Welcome back to 8 Cubes. Lambie had to take a week off. I am joined by ItsGuestGaming, my podcast partner over on the new and revamped Marvel Snapcast, and of course also my casting partner for Golden Gauntlets. Now, we have a ton to talk about this week. We're going to start with Kraglin, but before we do, guest, I'm going to throw it over to you. Introduce yourself. Who are you? What can people expect? And how good is Kraglin?
Hello. Hi. My name is Guest, for those who do not know, also known as ItsGuestGaming. I focus primarily on a load of Marvel Snap content with an entertainment twist. You can find me everywhere at that handle. There's the shameless self-promotion side of things.
Yeah, unlike other Marvel Snap creators, he tries to entertain you. Yeah. None of us try to do that, you know. The rest
Every
of
now
us
and
just
then,
it never even occurred to us.
You are very competitive, and I am willing to lose 8 cubes for a short. So I am always willing to do that, man. I know that's why we are built different, as we've established in prior series. No, but I mean, I'm just gonna go right into Kraglin, because Kraglin is one of these cards that I just kind of look at and I'm constantly going, besides ramp, why do I ever really want this card? And even in ramp, do I want it?
Yeah, I'll go one further.
Just bizarre.
Why do I want this card? One further. The Kraglin is a 3/3 with an on-reveal ability that banishes the top card of your deck. It checks the cost of that card. If that card costs 4 or more, you get +2 energy. If it costs 3 or less, you get +4 power on the Kraglin. So it is either a 3/3 +2 energy or a 3/7. This would have been a card I considered playing in 2023. In 2026, there are 2 cards that came out this season that make Kraglin look really weird. The first is Star-Lord, who is, you know, more energy and more power. So just baseline, if I'm doing something like building my deck around playing a bunch of big guys, I'm going to go for the card that gives me 5 energy and is 10 power, instead of the card that is going to give me 2 energy or be 7 power. Now, the other card that strikes me is, okay, this is a good example of why this card isn't good, is actually Drax, Avatar of Life, who we'll get to in a little bit. But that card is fine. A really good stat stick in a game that isn't really about stat sticks anymore. And just in basically every scenario where you're playing a 3/7, you'd rather play Drax instead, because that's a better 3/7 with a lot more upside. Kraglin, I look at and I'm like, okay, well, you're worse at energy than Star-Lord, and you're worse at stats than Drax, and I don't know what you're actually good at. I don't know what I'm doing any of this for.
I agree, and I was trying to figure out, because I know we both have a pretty solid opinion on, when you're looking at energy ramp, you have to be looking at a couple of different things, like the difference between a 3-cost energy ramp card like Luna versus Wiccan. It's what turn are they trying to affect, and what are you trying to do on that turn? This is filling the same space as something like a Wave and a Luna Snow, which are better stats and have a more consistent effect going for those stats. To do something of 5, working with 5 energy on a turn earlier, on turn 4. That is the goal of what you're trying to do with this card. You're trying to do something specific. But I don't understand why we have to banish a card to make that happen.
Yep. If you're trying to do something specific, why would you run the risk of blowing up your something specific?
Right. And even if it is a ramp deck where you have a load of big cards, you still want to have as many options, because the whole point of the deck is to get multiple of them down. If I have one less to get down, it's not like I cut out a lower card to replace for this one to get another large card because of this. It throws the whole deck building balance off. And I mean, of course, as always, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it specifically in Surfer with like 3 or 4 4-drops. Like, put Star-Lord in there, put a Wiccan build in there, and do some weird things and just see what I can do with it. So that way it's kind of like plus or minus, at least I did something with the card. I got some value out of it. And then I'm able to get 2 cards maybe down on turn 4 at 3 cost. Similar to what you want to do with a Wiccan line, but do it a little bit earlier. Like, I'm trying to figure out something just to say that I did, because I really don't think that this is a card that replaces anything else in many of the more relevant decks that it would want to be in.
Part of me wants to try to play it in a Star-Lord deck. Like, just in case I don't draw Star-Lord, I can at least get a bunch of energy that way. That's about as far as I got, though. Where it's like, this is my really bad backup Star-Lord. But then he hits, like, the wrong kind of card, and I get 7 power instead, and I'm just like, oh, this is way worse.
Imagine if this is just a reenactment of 2 weeks ago where we said, I'm going to throw Star-Lord in my Fallen One decks as a backup Fallen One, and then we ended up cutting Fallen One from those decks.
Surely that will happen with Kraglin. Take that. That is a fact. If it doesn't 100%. Happen, you can sue ItsGuestGaming.
Go for it. Find me.
Next up is Drax, Avatar of Life in review. This is a card that I was kind of impressed with. Like, I had, during my review of the season, I had this as the best non-Star-Lord card of the season. And I think that's probably true. It's just also a very old school card, where in a world where Marvel Snap wasn't a synergy-based, combo-y kind of game, which it definitely is right now, this is a card that I think would have stood out back in the day when we were still playing good stuff, mid-range decks with good points in interaction. This guy would have been an absolute monster in the world where you actually played Gladiator just to play Gladiator. This guy is way better than that. He's a very solid on-curve card, very good in Aurora decks, Doom 2099 decks, in as much as any of those kinds of decks still exist right now. He is one of the best cards at dealing with what people are able to do. Just a very relevant, powerful card, a great follow-up to an Iron Patriot. This is even a card that would have been useful 1 year ago, let alone 3 years ago. But specifically after the Techpocalypse and the increase in sort of synergy-based gameplay, which I think you could argue, being intentional or not, is just sort of a natural consequence of a larger pool of cards that's just going to happen. There are going to be more things that work together in more powerful ways the more cards you make. That has definitely dampened my enthusiasm for a card like this, which functionally has no ways to double its power. When you look at a lot of what makes a card really strong, it's how many ways do I have to make this thing happen multiple times a game? Show-Lao Maverick, Show-Lao Scarlet Spider, and of course the ever-present Star-Lord and anything that repeats an on-reveal. Pretty consistent examples there. This card has none of that. There's no, oh, I'm going to double its power. It's just itself. It clocks in, it does the job, and it does it well.
I agree. I think this is, again, kind of talking about when are you looking to use the card? And when you're looking at your deck, you got to be focusing specifically of what is the winning game plan, and then what is the build to get to that game plan. So if you're in a position where you're looking at turn 3 specifically, maybe turn 4, as a card, as a slot in the curve that you're trying to fill with something of value, look at about like a year and a half ago, we had this argument when Sage came out, that Sage is a card that wants to fill a similar lane-winning role, but wants to be played for cheap, obviously, 3 or even 2 if you reduce it, down on turn 6 to win that lane. Or you try to do some shenanigans with, Wong, Sage, and Taskmaster and those kinds of things, and that was a strategy for a while. But this is a card that kind of said, here, let's take Sage and Captain Marvel and mix them together, and say, leave it on turn 3. And then it'll just continue to play defense. It'll be like, oh, you played a bigger card? Hey, hold on. Let me keep the priority by potentially moving over here and playing a little bit of defense. The amount of times that I also lost a game because of the Drax movement was actually far less than I was originally anticipating. It does happen, but way less. I thought it was going to be one of those very obvious shifters that people would kind of play into as a release week tactic in a way to kind of move the Star-Lord out of the way. I never really saw that. I saw that by default on accident maybe twice.
It's so a lot, I think it's closer to Captain Marvel than like other things that have been in that space are.
Yeah. Oh no, I 100% agree with that. It's just interesting where you're trying to figure out what line are you trying to build and where does this card belong. And technically, I played a Drax deck to Infinite, and it worked, and it was confident and constant, and then I even played it post-Infinite in some of the Hydra Stomper shenanigans, and it's a great card in those decks, too. I mean, it's just solid. I think it's something you absolutely should have in your collection without a hesitation.
I think there's some hesitation where it's just a really good card at a thing that doesn't matter too much right now, where that would be the thing that would hold me back from full-throatedly recommending this. Where I think it is in a different world, one of the best cards in the game. We don't live in that world, and I don't really see any signs of us going back to that world where, like, I don't know. To me, if you're looking to play that kind of game plan, you're playing a Batroc deck instead, right? And so he ends up being sort of secondary, even in his own I care about stats and mid-range interactive world. He's really good, but he just has an utter and complete lack of synergy with anything. That means even things with like a hint of synergy are able to outpower him at the 3 spot like a Hydra Stomper. I do think he's good. But I think that, like, you should strongly consider whether you're actually going to play the card a lot of the time. Where we've seen sort of archetype all-stars become more than that. Like a Fin Fang Foom becoming a sort of metagame-defining card, even though it was released and it was just sort of an only ramp card. That is what it would take for Drax to be a must-buy for me. And obviously, I can't predict the future, but it doesn't seem particularly likely.
I think it's a card that is safe to have. And
Yes.
if you've invested or you are debating and have the coins to the tokens to invest into it, you shouldn't feel bad about having it in your collection. It's a good 3.5 to 4 star card.
Very solid. I want to sort of center a conversation on Star-Lord in much the same way that the metagame is sort of centered on Star-Lord, where this is a card that is undeniably powerful, undeniably strong, undeniably extremely beatable in a way that I think a previous comparison, that being Shou Lao, wasn't and or honestly might not be still. This is the kind of thing that if you want to beat it, you can go out of your way and you can make that happen. But the big question I want to ask is that a good gameplay experience? Because I think we talk a lot about whether or not Star-Lord is unbeatable. And on this channel, I think you should probably take it as a fait accompli. This is an extremely beatable card at high levels. People are actively going away from it because of how often you get like dunked under a toilet whenever you play this card. You just get given swirlies 100% of times you queue up a Star-Lord deck at high infinite. Just how it works at this point. But is that good for the game? Is that an acceptable gameplay experience? Is it an enjoyable play pattern? And I think a lot of people will sort of snap off a no answer to that. Like, no, this sucks. Why would I want this to be what everyone is doing? But I will say, I think the experience of playing a Star-Lord combo deck is one of the most fun things in the game. When you do what you're trying to do, there is something fundamentally fun about playing a bunch of giant Fin Fang Fooms. A bunch of big dragons, baseline appealing thing. The actual gameplay to get there, though, of I'm just not going to engage with the game for 5 turns, that's an interesting one. And I kind of want your take on whether or not you think this is enjoyable, and also the spectrum of my combo's pretty telegraphed because I wouldn't be skipping these turns otherwise. Is that an enjoyable pattern to have as part of the game? And how much play rate would it have to be for it to become deleterious?
No, this sucks. Because the way I kind of look at it, and yes, that was intentional, is to specifically say that the reason that the top of Infinite is playing that is because they know how good it is and they're constantly playing for that. And those are at the top of the Infinite. And like yourself, you want to play the best decks. You want to play the decks that are going to get you to climb further and further, get as many SP as possible. You're trying to, push for that number, that lowest number possible on the ladder. That's part of your play experience that you enjoy. Myself, and I know a large majority of others, want to have a little bit more flexibility in regards to playing the things that we would like to play and not so consistently get dunked on because this combo is too powerful. And if you don't have the thing to counter it, and if you don't get it right, it's just turning into Marvel Retreat, not Marvel Snap. And I do think that there is probably a threshold to find with Star-Lord to figure out exactly what that line is of, I don't know if it's a power number necessarily, like dropping it down in certain amount of power, because I know we've talked about that in the past, but I just don't think that that's necessarily a change to Star-Lord that changes the play rate of the card. In my opinion, Star-Lord could be a 4-0 and people will still play it because they can still get the crazy amount of energy on the final turn of the game, and they're just going to dunk on that turn. It might remove one or two possibilities, but not completely make the deck disappear.
I mean, just to be clear, if they made it a 4-0, the deck would disappear. Like, I fully believe that the deck would disappear. It would be terrible. You would have a terrible time playing it. You would feel awful about everything you did. It would be a worse Mr. Negative at that point. You would feel you would feel bad on every game that you didn't specifically do the combo in much the same way that you feel with Mr. Negative now.
The reason I disagree with that is because of what happens on turn 6 and the amount of things that you do that involve moving or utilizing the Star-Lord on turn 6 versus the amount of things that don't. And I think there are more things that you can do in what we'll call general strong Star-Lord decks, more things that don't require a remanipulation of that Star-Lord again, like Zola-ing the Star-Lord to put two of them in two other lanes, for example. Sure, you've removed that option from being more as valuable as it is, but you can still do the whole combo into MODOK Hela, which I know is not maybe the most competitive thing, but some people are claiming and utilizing that mechanic. And the fact that that's an option is something to think about.
I would argue
that's what I mainly talk about.
That's a Hela problem. My contention is pretty much always that's a Hela problem. Like, I mean,
everything with Hela is a problem. Let's
pretty
be
much
honest.
a Hela problem. She's going to be like that forever.
But the fact that it's an option, though, it really truly existed.
Yeah, people would still play that. I think you're right. People would still play the Hela thing.
Absolutely.
They shouldn't play it now and they shouldn't play it then, but they will still do it. Yes.
Don't do it. I agree. However, I think that somewhere in the balance of this card, and I don't know what dial it is or if it's an effect that can't be changed with a number dial. I'm luckily not ever needing to be in a true position to have to make that kind of a call and decision. That's Glenn and friends. Good luck. Have fun with that. But what I can say is the more and more I see the community talking about the card, the more and more I see a pattern in the conversation just being, I want to have more diversity in the decks that are good. And having back-to-back seasons where Sholau was very dominant and Star-Lord is very dominant is something of note. And I think the community is just feeling that burden. It doesn't mean that Shulau's bad. We'll talk about Shulau later too, but it just means that this overabundance of play rate, because the card is so astronomically better than a majority of the other cards out there right now. Whether it's beatable or not is not the question.
No, that face was astronomically better. The face was astronomically better. I just don't agree with that.
I know you don't agree with that. The majority of the people who you don't get to play against are the ones commenting the most in most other channels. And those are the ones that I would like to speak for on this by saying those play experiences in all other ranks are very clearly apparent. Now, it's not because I don't want to make destroy good. Let me be clear. I'm not saying that every deck should be good in the game. Well, you might, but we shouldn't have every deck in the game be good. But when there's such a gap between what is good and what isn't good, that's where I think there is a problem. And that's why we have to really talk about, does the community want to beat Star-Lord, or does the community want second dinner to fix Star-Lord?
That's, I think, a really good point, because my contention is I think that the community would rather not actually try to beat this card. I think that what happens is they look at the output rather than looking at the input, which is to say they look at that's 23 energy. It's fundamentally unfair. It's breaking the game. It's very obviously unfair, right? But they don't look at the input and they don't look at ways to try to beat that input. And I think that this speaks to It's like a normal thing, right? Like that's a normal thing, and like not a lot of people who aren't like seriously tryharding a game are going to be doing this. But what's so unique about Star-Lord specifically is that there isn't one card that beats it. There's like six cards that beats it, 6 cards that beat it. And because of that, it is easier to counter and deal with, but it also means that there is no, I just slap a Mobius in my deck the way there is for negative. And for what it's worth, I think Star-Lord and Mr. Negative are very fundamentally similar decks. They are. Like, when no one complains like this about Mr. Negative, even though, let's be honest, Mr. Negative cheats way harder than Star-Lord does. You are cheating way more energy with Mr. Negative Jane Foster than you are with a Star-Lord. Significantly. It just doesn't show up and say, here's 15 energy. You just don't see it. But you are. You are cheating more. And the fact that that is baked into people's understandings, and a new card that comes out that does something similar but has like better and cooler, presumably, I would say, payoffs, like more obviously messed up payoffs that we aren't all used to at this point. It's using new cards. It's a Fin Fang Foom deck, right? Like it's all this stuff that people aren't prepared for in a meaningful way. And so they don't have these sort of heuristics baked in of, oh, I could just leave, right? So like for a week, people are staying into Star-Lord decks and losing, right? I hope that that's mostly past people now, but for a week, that is what it was like. The mirrors are terrible. It had Loki syndrome, where Star-Lord comes out, and suddenly everyone's like, oh, we got to play the new card. How do I beat the Star-Lord mirror? And you don't. If you don't draw Star-Lord, it just doesn't happen. And so you have this, like, large group of disaffected players that are, I won't say disaffected based on false premises, but it's sort of like they're living inside a world that they made, and they could at any time choose to leave that world. It's Plato's Cave. At any time, you could pack a Daredevil Cosmo deck, and you could leave that world. You can go. You can do it. It is, you can free yourself from the cave. But there's no desire to do that, because I think, honestly, that people just expect it to get nerfed, so learning how to beat it isn't worth it.
You ever play on ladder and then run into someone who's got an all-inked discard deck?
I mean...
Or like an all-inked destroy deck? Just like
those guys are
card.
The coolest people on the planet.
Right. They play they know their deck inside and out. This is their favorite variation.
Yeah.
And sometimes, the deck is really good in the meta. Sometimes it might not be, but they still love to play it. You look at a player like that who casually plays but knows what they like. And then they have to figure out the new meta, and then they learn how to play around the new meta.
Yep.
When you have to sacrifice 2 to 3 slots in every deck construction to have to counter one card, that's a problem.
Why?
Because creativity shouldn't be limited by a 0.3% population appearance of one card.
But it's not a 0.3% population appearance. If it was, you wouldn't be teching for it.
No. I mean, in the sense of like, out of all of the cards in the game, population appearance is the wrong terminology. Out of all of the cards in the game, like, use your Mr. Negative example, right? If you're trying to play a deck and you're trying to play into a certain meta and you're seeing a lot of Pixie or you're seeing a lot of negative, or it's the beginning of the season, Mobius might be a good card to have as a general catch-all tech card, just to have it in there. Similarly to how we used to look at Shang-Chi, you need a good tech card in your deck, you throw a Shang-Chi in and it kind of saves that lane, right? Same thing with Luke Cage, etc. Stardust is kind of the best right now in that field, just because of the meta that we're in. It's the closest thing that we have to a catch-all, right? I would say comparatively to what we've had in the past.
I don't think it's Cosmo,
where we had much.
Sure.
Yeah, Cosmo single lane. I'm saying board wide. Best board wide card would be Stardust right now. And a lot of people are using their turns to do their combo on turn 4, even on turn 5, especially if you are choosing, what do I want to do? Play the Stardust on those turns, or play the Star-Lord on those turns. What do people want to play? They want to play the Star-Lord more often than not, because you get to do the cool thing.
Yeah.
But then there's the entire other 60% of the community, where if you take out this amount of appearances of Stardust and you take out the amount of appearances of Star-Lord, and you look at the entire rest of the community that is not playing a deck right now that has either of those two cards in it, that's a majority of the community. And it is an unfun play experience to have to factor in that 40% of my games are going to have to face one of those two cards.
I guess my point is, like, nobody entitled you to play a bad deck and win. You know what I mean? Like,
I agree
like
with that.
nobody said that you have a right to ignore what your opponent is doing and not try to beat them and still beat them. And while I do agree that there is a gap between, like, and this is sort of a natural thing as more cards come out, just that's how it's going to be. The stronger synergy sort of rise to the top as the new cards synergize with older cards in ways that maybe take 2 years for those older cards to be good. Looking at you, Grandmaster, right? Like, takes years and years and years for a card like that to actually be good, but eventually it seemingly finally is vindicated that Grandmaster does get better over time. I agree that there is a deleterious effect towards there's a lot of cards that you have to play if you want to beat Star-Lord, right? I agree with that. That's probably not ideal. And I think that that's largely a function of Star-Lord's play rate rather than specific power. If Mr. Negative had a 30% play rate, it would be annoying too, right? That just would be an annoying thing to deal with. But I also think that in the world where there is one tech card that beats Star-Lord, everyone's complaining about that. Look at the way we talk about Luke Cage or Mobius whenever those cards are good. I know I've had this conversation with you where it's like, oh, they made an afflict card. Everyone's just going to play Luke Cage. That sucks.
Right.
And so it's like, I don't know that this is a problem that is fixable in a meaningful way. I think it is just one of those things that is, sometimes there's going to be something that requires multiple cards for you to beat, and sometimes there's going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. And that's not like a value judgment on it in any way. It's just like, that's how things are. There's going to be different situations. And I think that, like, acting like what happens is people act like whatever one we're in is the bad one. And then when they do another one, people act like that one's the bad one. And it's like, I don't know that that's the right way to go about this. Like, I think that Star-Lord's play pattern, to be clear, sucks. It's not great, but I just don't know that the solution would be give everyone a one-size-fits-all answer to it.
I don't even think that it's about one-size-fits-all. I think it's about limiting the deck building constraints by pigeonholing your turns. This deck is basically saying, okay, you have to change and really focus on decks that only will allow you to do things on turns 1, 2, and 6. Because you have to spend turns 3, 4, and 5 countering Star-Lord.
I don't think you have to spend turns 3, 4, and 5 countering Star-Lord. I think you can, for example, play the card
Cosmos, Stardust.
You can literally just play this card Super Giant that is just turn 4, and it's already a good deck. Like,
but what if my deck doesn't synergize with that? What if I want to play a style of deck that doesn't synergize with that? But this is what I'm saying.
No, I understand, but like fundamentally,
that restriction.
It's a complaint that you have to adjust. Like, that's what's being offered here is I shouldn't have to adjust to anything. That's the complaint. Like, I should be able to play my inked out destroy deck forever. And it's like, I would love that to be true, but I don't know that you can complain when it isn't. I think that's a great thing to be true. I'm a big destroy guy. I like the deck. I think it's awesome. But I don't know that you can expect it and be angry when that isn't true. I think that that's the part that bothers me.
It's the same argument as hot locations, basically. Right? I want to play what I want to play, and I want to play it a certain way.
But you know what I do on hot locations? I don't play. I accept that they are a part of the experience that I am simply going to have to opt out of or adjust to. And when I do play on a hot location, I build for the hot location. Because otherwise, I'm throwing everything away.
Which is why the same argument. Now imagine having a hot location 7 days a week.
No, I get what you're saying. I understand. Like, it's a frustrating experience. At the same time, that's something that's going to happen. Your deck is not going to be the same deck forever. There are cards coming out. And I don't think you could play any other card game and seriously get angry when your deck is no longer good in context. I don't think that that is a reasonable expectation to have of any card game ever. And I don't know why it's suddenly a reasonable one in this game.
Because this is the most casual.
I think it's a great goal. I would love, again, you know me, I think any metagame in which destroy is good is a great metagame. Yes. I'm a big fan of like diversity and defined archetypes and identity. And I think that it is a good thing when they create archetypes with identity and then continue making cards for those archetypes and making them powerful. I just don't think you can come into a card game and say, I am entitled to this experience, and if I don't get it, that's a problem with the game.
I think that's because that expectation has been set.
You think so?
Considering how casual this game has been and typically is, like think about how long it took us for us to get a tournament scene, to get a competitive scene. What was the reason for years that we didn't have one? And I quote, we don't want this to be a competitive game. Dash, somebody from Second Dinner who will remain anonymous. Okay? That is why. And as a casual game, coming from a competitive player, it is tough to see the other side.
I that's part of why I wanted to have you on, is because like you see this section called The Gap here, because what Star-Lord has done is inverted a skill curve in a way, by which I mean, normally what will happen that differentiates High Infinite from everywhere else is there'll be like one deck that's really hard to play, that's really good at High Infinite, and not a lot of other places have that influence on the metagame, but usually there's something else in the space. With Star-Lord, it's the opposite. Star-Lord itself is really easy to play, and all the stuff that beats it requires contextual knowledge. And so everyone at High Infinite is putting this dude in the dunk tank, but it doesn't seem like that's trickling down in a meaningful way, which functionally means it doesn't exist. Like all of these things that I'm talking about, it's like this beats Star-Lord, this beats Star-Lord, this beats Star-Lord. They're all true, and they all will beat Star-Lord. If you want to take that away and go play them, you'll beat the shit out of Star-Lord. You will absolutely put that guy in a blender. But the play rate just isn't there for them to make a meaningful dent in this guy at lower ranks. And that's typically not how it goes. Like normally when there's like a move bounce dominating the metagame, okay, maybe not everyone is playing move bounce at lower ranks, but they're playing something in a similar space that's like a little bit easier in terms of point output, and that means that a lot of the things that are typically good to tech against it are still good to do it. But what High Infinite is doing now is beating the decks that are beating the Star-Lord decks, which means that the metagame is amazing. Like, you talk about diversity, people are playing all sorts of garbage because people are devoting their slots to beating Star-Lord, and basically anything with a functional game plan that dodges the stuff that beats Star-Lord is going to beat those decks. And so you have people playing, like, Show Lao Destroy. Like, you have people playing, like, Pixie Fin Fang Foom. You have people playing, like, Wiccan Shang-Chi. Like, there's all sorts of just, like, things that you can't play into Star-Lord that are succeeding at High Infinite because of how hated out Star-Lord has been at that level. And it's never been like this before. Usually there's a gap, but you can correct for it. This is one of the first times where I feel like there's a gap that I can't correct for. I don't think if you're playing a lot of Star-Lord, you can play Doom 2099 the way I do. I think if you see Star-Lord enough, that deck is unplayable. It only exists in context. And I'm kind of interested to see what your take on that is. You're what, like 7K SP, right? About that range?
Around there, 72. Yeah, 72-ish.
Are my suppositions about this true? Because these are just things that like I assume I am going to be off on this for X amount, right? I assume this. Am I right? Or has like Daredevil, Batroc trickled down? Has Supergiant trickled down? Are those things running around? Are you still seeing a lot of combo Star-Lord? Is it more like normal Star-Lord? Because this is one of those cases where I'm in a bubble, and my bubble is people that actually know how to beat this deck. And so I don't know how far down that bubble extends.
you're literally speaking about a bubble in a bubble at the same time. You're speaking in, this is the context of what I know. These are the decks that I face. These are the people that I play against the most often, and this is what I'm seeing. Past habit has regularly shown that, top competitive creators will build some decks that are great, and then we see a meta counter to them, and then people start building the meta counters, and then they start playing those meta counters. And I do think that it's very much an influence specifically also on Shou Lao, where because it was the two best cards of the first two seasons of this year are both the season pass. The card that has the highest obtain rate out of any of the cards throughout the entire season, throughout the entire rest of the season. It's always the season pass that is the most obtained card. And when people are having those as their primary option, of course they're going to want to play them. And then eventually, in this case, again, where, Shou Lao is incredibly strong, well, we need to figure out counters to Shou Lao in some way, and that's still something that everyone's struggling about to a degree. I know you are included.
Yeah.
And then we come into another season pass that is, again, incredibly strong. And then those archetypes that want to combat it, like, okay, I have more fun as a more casual player playing a Star-Lord deck, or playing a discard deck, or playing a destroy deck, or playing a regular bounce deck than I do playing Ronin. Because even though offense is fun, defense wins championships. And the top players are currently playing better defense. That's what you're seeing. You're seeing more defense being built into decks rather than I want to make the biggest number possible. Because we all know big number equals fun game.
Bigger number,
that's
better
why
person.
Star-Lord's really fun.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And that's where there's a big difference with the rest of the community, where we want to do the big number. We want to have a simpler keyword answer to being able to combat said big number. However, it literally makes no sense to play anything else if I want to climb. That's where there's a problem. There's such a gap between the top deck for those who are at SP 7000 and then the second or third best deck for those same people.
You think
it's still Star-Lord is so astronomically high because the ceiling is so high on it that it becomes a retreat machine, and you're just gaining and gaining and gaining cubes, because if you get your combo set up, it's over. It just as equally. If the combo goes off, you retreat.
Yeah.
And those players know that part. I was very much one of those players too. And as someone who took a Star-Lord deck to Infinite, sometimes you make it happen, sometimes you don't. I adapted my Star-Lord deck to play around some of the counters. And that's what worked for me.
Yeah, so
but that's because I still wanted to play a Star-Lord deck.
Sure. But what is it that you think prevents people from playing Daredevil Batroc? What is it that you think prevents people from playing, Ronin Master Mold? What is it that you think prevents people from playing Cerebro 3?
Mm-hmm.
I think that largely what's happening here is people are rejecting a context being forced on them. A forced context change, right? And I think that's it's a valid thing to be wigged out by, but I don't know that it's a valid thing to be this can't ever happen. You know what I mean?
When we have strong metas, or when we have good metas, when you're teching into that meta, you're devoting 1 or 2 slots to try to combat 3 to 4 different good decks. That's not the meta. The meta is you're teching for 1.
But it's been like that before.
That's what the problem.
We've been I don't think the reaction was the same. It's been like this before. We've had, remember when the first Golden Gauntlet qualifier happened and it was just Invisible Woman?
Mm-hmm.
It's been like this. We've had Thanos be this deck. We've had a lot of decks be like the deck that you're if I'm playing on ladder, I have to have multiple cards devoted for this matchup. I'm preparing for this, right? And it didn't seem like the reaction was the same to those that it has been to this.
Because we've learned from those exact same experiences if we as a community bitch and complain enough, the devs will fix it eventually. Because all of those decks you mentioned,
they did,
were nerfed by the devs. They weren't solved by the community.
I think that's the thing that gets me about Star-Lord is like, that's the thing. Like, this is one of those cases where it's like, I think you can nerf this card, but I think people are dreaming way too big on this, where it's like, we got to take 5 points of power off this. We got to make Fin Fang Foom a 7-8. And it's like, hold on. You could take 1 point of power off of this. Like, this is not that far off. And it's like, I think so much of it is just how visibly it breaks rules that people are reacting to it in this way, where even a Mr. Negative sort of invisibly breaks rules. This card breaks rules in a very visible and obvious way that is more pronounced than that. It's also a better card by a wide margin, to be clear.
Yeah, there's nothing like seeing going into turn 6 and you just see that +4.
You're just like,
+4.
Okay.
+4 repeatedly. It just is like taking that stake and driving it further and further into the ground as you're trying to already hit the retreat button.
It's
like
really painful.
That's what that moment is.
Yep. I do wonder how much of it is visibility, how much of it is a season pass card, how much of it is compounded on from Sholau, where Sholau was actually this kind of problem, where it actually sort of is unsolvable. Like, I still don't have an answer to that guy. I have no idea what to do about him. He's still just really strong. It feels like Star-Lord is taking the brunt of negative community sentiment that he didn't really earn. And for a very beatable card, I still think he's probably nerf-worthy, just because I would argue a lot of the problem with him is play rate, and if you like take a point off of him, that drops his play rate in a significant way. I kind of genuinely do believe that. Like, just being like,
off of Star-Lord, 1 power?
Yes, I think if you ding him, he will lose 25% of his play rate. I genuinely believe that. Because you're like, no one would ever do that. No one would ever think that Star-Lord got that much worse. How could you possibly believe that we as people would be so stupid as to believe that, right? You're thinking like everyone will surely realize that means the card is just as strong as it already was, right? I don't think that everyone will realize that.
I think you and your community in Top Infinite will feel that way.
Yes.
I think everybody else will look at it as the chamber change. It means nothing. I'm still playing the card.
Ooh, see, I think it's the opposite. I think me and my community will look at it and realize that the card is still going to be played, and I think everyone else will be like, they nerfed it. I'll play something else. I'm free now. I think that's how people look at that stuff.
But I do think you're spilling over the accidental pattern of what happened to Shu Lao with Season Reset.
Oh, no, I'm talking more
into that
my example here is more like V-Hand, where it's like that card lost 1 point of power, and everyone was just like, oh, thank God. I'm free. I don't have to do this anymore. I can go play any other deck, and I don't have to play this because it'll just beat me if I don't play it. I think that'll happen if they just take like 1 point of power off the guy. You take Fin Fang Foom to 7-10. You take Star-Lord to 4-4. Deck's play rate drops from 25% of your games to 15. Is that a meaningful solve?
To more than half the community? No.
Yeah. Interesting. What would you consider a meaningful solve to that group of people? Like
5-6.
What play rate do you think you'd need to get it to? Give me a play rate and win rate target for this card, because I think this is sort of where it gets down to. I kind of think that the community will not accept anything other than this card being dog shit.
No, I think if you get this card to a 15% play rate at a 52% win rate, I think then you kind of come to terms with it.
Okay.
I think that's what happens. I think part of that comes from it becoming a 5-cost card, though.
I'll be honest with you.
It's the turn 4 combo that ruins it.
I think 4-4 and 7-10 would do that. I think you'd get to like 52% at about 15% play rate. I think it would do that.
All right, Glenn, bet. Make it happen.
Really, this is what I mean when I say I think people. It's like the Sholau thing, right? Didn't you pitch 6-cost Sholau last time? It's the same conversation, right? Where it's like.
It was one of the ideas where it's like the only other thing I could think of was when we like listed through everything, and then you like shit all over that idea just as much.
Look, I tend to think that people are...
for the right reason, though. I'm not saying, and even then I said it's not the best solution, but I was on the same train as you about cards with potentially
I was
needing,
way more off.
cards versus characters. Like,
Yeah,
I was on that same boat.
Yeah. I was I think I even overestimated how much Shola needed to be nerfed. Although maybe he still does. We'll get to that in a little bit. This is the longest episode of all time.
Oh, yeah.
I want to talk about two massive outliers that Star-Lord is covering for. And this is part of why I'm so adamant about like Star-Lord not really being a big problem, because these guys are problems. Like Batroc and Sholau are, I won't say they're more oppressive than Star-Lord, but I think they prevent more variety than Star-Lord does. Where these are just very clearly the best things to do in a world where people are countering Star-Lord by margins that are Kim Jong-un election margins. Like you're doing North Korean election margins with Batroc and Sholau against every other mid-range deck that has ever existed. You are putting them in a dumpster. It is unbelievable. And so you have Star-Lord, right? And it's like, oh, how do we solve a problem like Star-Lord? And you go into the tank and you come out with Batroc. It's like, yeah, of course you did. What else would it be? Like, what else would it be? Oh, I don't even want to play Supergiant in my Batroc deck anymore. I cut Supergiant for Daredevil in my Batroc deck so that I didn't have to stop scaling my guys because Supergiant is hurting me. Even though it instantly wins the Star-Lord matchup, I'm already favored enough that I don't even need it because I'm playing Batroc. I talked to Iris about this, and I was like, how do you play so much Batroc? And she was basically just like, well, look, the problem is if I play any other mid-range deck, I'll lose to the Batroc. I can't play any other mid-range deck. I have to play the Batroc deck and then be like, okay, well, I'm going to make the Batroc deck beat Star-Lord. Or be like, okay, I'm going to ignore the Star-Lord matchup, treat it like Mr. Negative, and go beat every mid-range deck. And be like, all right, well, I'll take, 1 cube losses 25% of the time or whatever. And either one of those, for some reason, is still just a freaking Batroc deck. Like, you have the Batroc deck to beat Star-Lord, and then you have the Batroc deck with Sholau to beat the other Batroc deck. And you talk about, like, how Star-Lord prevents people, like, at least I can beat that guy. At least if I want to beat Star-Lord, I can do things about it. I don't know what the hell to do about Batroc. I don't know what I'm supposed to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to play a Killmonger mid-range deck. It's 2026. You're not going to do that, right?
Yeah. No, it's true.
There's so much going on with that deck that just like the fundamental understanding of Batroc as every other one drop in the game is like a 1-3 with upside, and Batroc is just like, what's up? I'm 15 points. Why?
Yeah.
Why are like we talk about how, like the restrictions Star-Lord places on things. My contention is that these two guys place way more restrictions on what you're allowed to be doing. When you want to talk about the gap between a good deck and a bad deck, these guys are the gap. Star-Lord is an obvious one, but he's like, I don't know. He's Darth Vader. These two are Emperor Palpatine. There's a lot of attention being paid to one of them, but there's another guy higher up the hierarchy pulling the strings, and that's what these two dudes are.
I agree that it's pretty straightforward that, to me, at least with Batroc, that it needs to be a 1-0 at minimum at this point, because it's so easy to make it happen. It's just for a one cost, you're looking to cost to power, right? How much did it cost? How much am I going to get out of it? And the fact that you can just drop this so easily, even to drop it down on turn 3 and proc a move, because Silk is already down and it's going to start moving right away. Like, it's just, the scalability of the card is way too easy. Considering that we also at the same time have inverse cards like Mad Thinker, where you should think that's just as easy to make scale and scale and scale. And then you look at it and go, why is this so difficult? Why is this dog shit? Then you look at a Batroc and go, actually, it's just as easy to make that scale versus that scale. The difference is Batroc is going over the damn ceiling past the moon and then still landing back in the right place to win the lane. There's a big difference in those types of cards. And I don't think the solution is to make it a +1 like Mad Thinker, but I do think just you've got to drop it way down as a starting point, because its end point is way too high for a 1-cost card in particular. Because we wouldn't say that if this was a 2-cost card,
No.
nor do I ever think it should be a 2-cost card. It should be a 1-cost card. It makes more sense for what that deck wants to do. This goes in the dumpster if this becomes a 2-cost card, in my opinion. However, I do think that it needs a lower starting point.
I'm kind of a 1/3 + 1 truther because
No.
dude, he gives you free Craven
No.
procs. He gives you free procs on your
I
Hydra
know.
Stomper. He's doing like if you think I would cut this card at 1/3 + 1, you're insane. He's still a staple. He's still like an easy include, even if he's not that big. And he's even a better card if you draw him late. Like
That's the problem, though. If you're going to nerf this card, the nerf to the card has to be I didn't draw it late. Sorry, I didn't draw it early. You want the nerf to this card to be,
that's good.
I
That's
want to
good.
play this down on turn 1 or 2 or 3. If I draw it late, I have a downside.
So you
Right
want to
now, that
increase
still
the
doesn't
delta
exist.
between good Batroc and bad Batroc.
That's how you do that, by leave the +2 and you leave the starting point as being lower versus a 1/3 where I'll play that with Shu Lao
Play
and
that
have a great
whenever,
day
yeah.
every time.
I will do it.
I know.
Speaking of this guy, he's still sort of sitting on top of every mid-range deck. Like, you talk about the ways in which Star-Lord forces a deck to adapt. I think the difference between Star-Lord and Sholao is that I can choose to beat Star-Lord. I can make choices that allow my deck to beat Star-Lord. I don't know that I can do that for Sholao. And
Okay,
I think Oh, go ahead.
No, before you go on, because there's a majority of people who are going to listen to this and they want to hear one thing in particular first from you. Explain the difference between Shu Lao as a mid-range deck versus your assessment of what a Star-Lord deck is.
Sure. Okay, so a Star-Lord deck is a lot easier to deal with because of the ways in which it specifically interacts with turn 5. Because the deck is predicated on multiplying the Star-Lord that you played on turn 5, there are many more available pieces of counterplay. They just require you to devote specifically something to turn 5. There's a reason you see Daredevil show up a lot. There's a reason you see Supergiant show up a lot. Those are both aimed at the turn on which their combo happens, right? It's something similar to like a MODOK in a discard deck is how you want to counterplay this, right? If MODOK were somehow the best deck and every deck was like, I have to turn 5 play a MODOK, you'd be playing a lot of Supergiant and a lot of Daredevil Cosmo. It would be a very similar thing. Right. And the difference with Sholao is there are no cards that counterplay turn 6 in a meaningful way, the same way there are cards that counterplay turn 5. If cards like Daredevil and Supergiant didn't exist, I would not feel the way that I do about Star-Lord. But those apply specifically to the play pattern Star-Lord wants to play on. Star-Lord is a card that you play as a setup piece, which means that if you disrupt that setup, whether or not they're doing a turn 4 Star-Lord and multiplying it or a turn 5 Star-Lord, you are still going to be able to stop it from happening. Those cards don't exist for turn 6, so Sholao gets free reign. It is just better at dealing with what you would try to beat it with. This card is a card that adds green power that somehow, by the nature of how it plays out, mostly dodges Shadow King. Like, it's just unreal. Like, whoa, I'm going to put Super Adaptoid in my deck. Oh, well, it would be such a shame if I had another activate card, Maverick, in the same lane as my Scarlet Spider, and you could steal the Maverick instead of the Scarlet Spider. None of the counterplay is 100%. There are 100% counterplays to Star-Lord. There is nothing that is better than a 50-50 to Sholao unless you are doing more points. And Sholao is not just really good at doing points, it is really good at including interaction. Every single version of Sholao that I play has at least a Cosmo in it. At least a Cosmo. So it's like, all right, well, counterplay me. My Maverick's under a Cosmo. Good luck. Now you're actually going to have to guess where I'm going to play the Sholao and 50-50 this Cosmo. You're going to have to guess that because you don't have a Daredevil. Because you don't have anything that can give you that information on the turn that actually matters. It's a turn 5 versus turn 6 distinction. And why Star-Lord is so much easier to beat is because if you counterplay it on turn 5, the deck falls apart. Show Lao, there are no guaranteed ways to counterplay it on turn 6. There just aren't. They're all like, if you do this, then you do this. If I can put something together, oh, maybe I can guess where the Show Lao is going and Cosmo it. And that's good. It's like an interactive, enjoyable thing. Yeah. It's just also a bajillion, gazillion points that goes onto every mid-range deck and doubles itself.
I think when it comes to Show Lao, when we get to second OTA of March, we're going to be complaining more about Show Lao than we are going to be about Star-Lord, even if they don't change either card.
I agree.
And I don't think that the community is necessarily ready for that, because right now they have the season pass villain, Star-Lord. And I do think that as much as Star-Lord is a problem for a large majority of the community, because of all the restrictions we've talked about in this episode that it creates, I do think that even if you do figure out a successful way to nerf Star-Lord, we end up back in January all over again, and we're going, oh, we forgot about this dragon. Those 2 points did absolutely nothing. Oh, now what do we do?
These guys are much bigger problems. That is my fundamental contention.
I agree. And I think that come March, that's when we're going to have to see them predict the future, because they've done it with certain OTAs in the past where they see what the clearly best deck is, and then they also put a nerf or two on the deck that's probably going to take its place. If they address Star-Lord, they're going to also have to hit that trick at the same time, and maybe one of the off pieces to Show Lao simultaneously, just to allow the meta to reset.
I have some pretty severe concerns about that, basically. Like, I really do think that this is one of those situations where people are not necessarily mad at the wrong guy, but when I talk about Star-Lord taking shit for Show Lao, I think people felt this way about the Show Lao metagame, and then they carried that feeling into the Star-Lord metagame. And because Star-Lord was around, they were blaming that guy. But the guy who's responsible for the feeling is the dragon. Like, that's the guy who made you feel like this originally. And you just sort of carried that in here. This is, when you talk about gaps between decks like Destroy and everything else, I'm playing Show Lao in Destroy instead of Null. You talk about gaps. That's a gap. Like, you talk about the difference between any other deck with Scalers and Batroc, Sam, Wilson, Craven. You talk about playing Elsa Bloodstone, and then you look at those cards, and you're like, okay, that's a gap. When you talk about things that reduce diversity, I would argue that cards that are closer to strictly better point outputs, like Show Lao, like the Batroc Sam package, those are much more threatening to diversity than a really good combo deck. Those are just fundamentally going to be more threatening because the answers are so much more nebulous.
And the skill required to play the decks is also a huge part of it. There's a huge difference between a good and bad Star-Lord player versus a good and bad Show Lao player.
I disagree, actually. I
think a huge
difference.
Star-Lord's
a lot easier. Well, let me clarify. I think Star-Lord's a lot easier. You're okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, just making
the
sure.
Gap is small. Yeah. It's a smaller gap to go between good and bad Star-Lord versus the big gap between a good and bad Show Lao player.
Which, to be fair, is an argument in favor of nerfing Star-Lord, right? Because that just means that it's better lower down, which is where most people are. And, you know, it doesn't matter if something's a problem at high infinite, if something's not a problem where I'm at, if it's a huge problem everywhere else, right? It's the Surtur thing. If the analogy is Star-Lord as Surtur, I basically buy it. But if the analogy that Star-Lord is the problem or like the cause of this, I don't. I think it's these other guys.
I agree.
Okay, so longest episode ever. Guest told me to add this to the bottom, and I did, and I don't know what it is, and my cat just jumped on my table. So I'm going to try to get her off, and you're going to explain this.
So I started a series with Not My Dance called The Ban List, where we argue about different points that we want to put on the, season-long ban list wall of like topics we don't like things that went on there are topics like we don't like random boosters on the tracks. That got onto the ban list after we debated about it. We talked about the inconsistencies between the words cost, and cost.
I only even know 2 of those, which really goes to show you that there definitely is something going on there.
There's literally dozens, and they're wrong. That's the problem. So like things like that, we debate about it, and it's a lighthearted show. We have some fun with it, but I wanted to throw something to you because on the next episode, I always have to come with something that I'm going to stand as this is something that I would like banned from the community, not a card, not a location, but just something that's either wrong with the game, a belief from the community, a personal opinion, a bug that's literally game breaking. I try to stay away from those, but sometimes they end up in the conversation. I want to ask you to choose what I argue next week.
I have
Not
one.
my dance.
I have one, but it's going to be too easy of an argument to make good content.
It doesn't matter if we disagree on it, because if we disagree on it, then we take it to Snap Court and then we talk about it back and forth to see does it go there.
Free. I have 75 notifications in my inbox. I cannot clear them. Get rid of that. Give me a button that clears all my notifications. It's literally that simple. I would have, you know how far down I would have to scroll to get to some of those notifications? You know how much of a pain in the ass it is to get rid of those, if they even get rid of? I have all these notifications that are like, you got, here's your bonus from the Marvel Snap web shop. Stop. Stop it. I don't need that. Give me a button that clears all these notifications or claims all the stuff out of it. There are 75 notifications in my inbox I will never get rid of.
You don't mind the red dot? It's just specifically the inbox ones?
Well, there's a red dot on the inbox.
Well, I mean, like, generally speaking, all the different red dots. It's just the inbox that bothers you the most.
The inbox one pisses me off because there's no solve for it. And it's like, the other red dots are such a low number that I can ignore. But the inbox one is such a high number. And here's another one, because this is a UI problem. Every time you click into something, it takes you to like the beginning of whatever that track is. So if I scroll really far down in the inbox and I click on the thing at the bottom of the inbox, and then I click out of that, it'll bring me back to the top of the inbox, which is what makes this take so much time. The same thing happens when you go into like the season pass, right? If I have saved a variant so I can open it on stream, implying I stream, every time I open the season pass, it takes me to that variant, even though I want it to take me to the bottom where I can open the rest of my stuff. And every time I open something, it takes me back to the top. And then I open something and it takes me back to the top. Get rid of that.
Okay. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to present it to Not My Dance. And I'll have it be about the inbox specifically, because then I can encompass all of that, the notifications, the scroll issues, the etc. I had something similar when it came to the collection filtering. That was the first one that ever made it to the ban list.
Yes, dude. Whenever you turn it on favorites only and then you do anything and it's like we're not on favorites only anymore for no reason.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. That was the first thing that ever made it to the ban list. So I'm going to present that. And then what we do is, if we agree, we just roast it together for a couple of minutes. If we disagree, we talk about why we disagree and then figure out, does it actually make it there or not? And then at the very end, we look at the comments and we always try to pick one of our favorites. He'll pick his, I pick mine. If we happen to pick the same one, that person also gets a season pass. We give away a season pass if we both choose the same comment every single episode. And now we're doing themes where the next episode after this, we'll also be talking about limited time game modes exclusively. So it's going to be, and that way we always have something to look forward to. So I'm looking forward to the next episode.
Put high voltage on the ban list.
Just all of high voltage?
Any high voltage that does not allow me to spend 900 gold on the card or whatever. If I have to, like, I hate chores. All the high voltages are the most chore heavy. It's not ideal.
High voltage, not allowing us to.
Yeah, just let me not play.
Skip.
Like, yeah, the fact that I have to like, it's not just that I can't play, it's that I can't stack up missions. I have to be like, let's log on every three times a day. What do you mean? I hate it.
It's almost like you want to play the game the way that you want to play it, and the game will let you play it. That's weird.
It is weird. I know you're doing a bit here where it's like, oh, Star-Lord. You're doing an analogy to Star-Lord, but I don't know. I think the big thing I took away from the Star-Lord conversation is I have way less animus for a solvable problem than I think a lot of other people do. Where it's like, if I have an option here, I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine, right? If I can do something about it, I can. But where I really have animus is when there are no solves to the problem. Like,
Fair.
old Hella before Stardust came out. Like, I don't know if people have noticed, I don't really complain about Hella anymore, and that's because there's a solve to the problem, right? Like, I can do something about that, right? Like, I can change my deck and adapt, and that's like, it's just become like not really a thing that bothers me anymore, even though it's like, haha funny, but it's not really a card that I care about too much anymore. It's just how it is, right? Cards that present problems that are unsolvable, I think, are much more serious to me than they seem to be to you or to like the community you are speaking on behalf of here. Like, when there is a solve, that's just, I'm not even saying that the card doesn't become a problem, but it becomes like a much lower tier of one. Like, I can do something about this. It's fine. This card is like kind of busted, but I can beat it, and I can still play, at least a style of deck that I enjoy. I might not be able to play the specific deck that I like, but I can play a style of deck that I enjoy that is similar to it. And what's always so disqualifying about Hella is you couldn't do that. She would take entire styles of decks and rule them out. Where with Star-Lord, it's like, no, you can play mid-range. You can go play mid-range right now. Just prepare your deck for Star-Lord. You can play a combo deck. Just make sure you go over the top of it. You can do stuff. Like, the play styles are there, but the specifics are not. And to me, the play styles matter a lot more. And I think that's the big difference that I learned over the course of this conversation. Thanks, as always, to ItsGuestGaming for joining us on this, or joining me on this, or joining you on this. This was a really, I think, edifying experience for me. Because one of the things that I like about Guest is it's hard to find someone who's actually going to be like, no, you're this is bullshit to me. It's a little bit difficult to do. Like, you might think that that's like a dumbass problem to have, but it's hard to find someone that's like, hey man, no. I think you're missing this. I think you're missing this. I think you're missing this. And Guest is always really willing to do that. I sometimes it worries me because that's what I like about him, but I worry that, like, people will go on and be like, ooh, they don't like each other. That's the worry, is because, like,
people think that too, which is really funny.
Yeah, it's like no, I don't think that's true. It's very difficult for me to find someone who is able to articulate things in that way and speak to places where I don't have eyes, right? And even though, like, I do still disagree, like, I just sort of articulated at the end, like, the sort of reasons for that, right? Like, I don't think Star-Lord is the problem. I think if you want to nerf him, that's fine, but I think nerfing him beyond belief because he's a good combo card is kind of ridiculous, and as long as you're able to solve the problem, it's a good enough thing for me, right?
Right.
But I don't know that I would have gotten to that exact formulation if I didn't have someone pushing me on it. So I do want to thank Guest for that specifically, because that's how you get better at formulating your own thoughts, is having someone be like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? If you liked this kind of stuff, we do a podcast together. So if you liked that kind of, like, iron sharpens iron kind of deal, check that out. I'll have it linked in the description. Guest, take us out.
Well, thank you so much, KM, for having me here for this episode of 8 Cubes. He's KMBest. You've been phenomenal, and he'll see you in the next one.
I've got glasses on. Now you can tell us apart.
Oh, yeah. This is true.